say Trump wins. Now, that's not a sure thing. It's going to be a close election, but my models show Trump winning. So he gets more than 270 electoral votes. So we come up to December 17th when they actually count those votes in the state capitals, and they're going to be disputes and litigation. But let's say we make it, I'm just kind of looking ahead as far as we can, to January 6, 2025. Everyone's spun up about January 6, 2021. We know what happened, but this is January 6, 2025. Those electoral votes go to the House and the Senate. Now, here's the key, and this is why Trump's campaigning in places like New York and California. He's not going to win New York or California, but they're fighting over House seats. Is if the Democrats take a majority of the House of Representatives, which is possible, there are only 4 or 5 vote difference right now, led by Jamie Raskin, they're going to pass a resolution saying that Trump is an insurrectionist under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now, a lot of people say, wait a second, didn't the Supreme Court throw that out? Not exactly. Colorado and Maine tried to kick Trump off the ballot on that ground. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said states cannot do it. So Colorado and Maine couldn't do it, nor could any other state. But they explicitly said the Congress could. And it was a federal issue, exactly. So now you pass this resolution, what happens? Trump's votes would be disqualified. Let's say he has 300 electoral votes, and pick a number over 270. Those are disqualified on the grounds that he's an insurrectionist. So then what happens next? Well, now nobody has 270, because in this scenario, Kamala Harris doesn't get 270. Trump does, but he's disqualified. So now the election goes to the House of Representatives. This, by the way, has happened before, 1800, 1824, and then 1876. They still can't figure out what happened, but it has happened before. So, but now you flip over from the 14th Amendment to the 12th Amendment. I should let the listeners know I happen to be a lawyer, so I'm enough of a geek to read all this stuff. Now you're in the 12th Amendment, 1804, and what does that say? Well, the House votes to choose the president, but there are a couple of caveats. One is they can only vote for someone who got in the top 3 electoral votes. And this is, back in the days, maybe 3 or 4 people get electoral votes. George Wallace got electoral votes in 1968. Top 3. But there's only going to be one. If you disqualify Trump, no one else is going to win a state.
Yeah, RFK is
Kamala
out.
Harris is the only one you could vote for, because top 3, but she would be the top 1, because that's it.
Now, why wouldn't it go to J.D. Vance? Why doesn't he take those?
Well, I think that's what's going to happen, but you have to sort of follow. The 12th Amendment is a playbook. I think that's where it will end up. I agree with that, but you have to kind of look at the sequence. Now, in the House, here's the interesting part. There are 435 members, but you don't vote by member. You vote by state delegation. So Texas would get 1 vote. I live in New Hampshire. We'd get 1 vote, the same as Texas. The Republicans control a majority of the state delegations by a bigger margin. They barely control a majority of the House. But when you go by state delegations, it's more like 28-22. The Republicans have a substantial majority. But the problem is you can only vote for Kamala Harris no matter what, because nobody else has any electoral votes. The answer then, the 12th Amendment says this, is for the Republicans, if they have the cojones, to go out and stand on the mall in the snow, and then the House lacks a quorum. And the 12th Amendment says you can't do anything what we're talking about if you don't have a quorum.
Right.
So if you lack a quorum, then what happens? The 12th Amendment says the vice president becomes the acting president. Now, J.D. Vance would not suffer this disqualification, going back to the insurrection. So J.D. Vance would become the acting president of the United States if the House lacks a quorum. And I describe this, Glenn, it's all in the 12th Amendment, it's in the 14th Amendment. Some of this has been litigated in years past. It sounds crazy, but just think about what we've been through the last 3 months. Two, maybe 3 assassination attempts, a coup d'etat on Joe Biden, a nominee who didn't get 1 vote in 2 tries, not 1 vote in a primary. And so there's enough craziness to go around. So again, I'm just kind of reading the Constitution and applying it. It has happened before. In 1800, we ended up with Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, who were bitter enemies and opposing parties. But that's what happened. And here you could have Kamala, J.D. Vance worst case, or J.D. Vance as acting president if the Republicans walk off the floor and they lack a quorum.
This is craziness. One of the reasons we are successful, we had cheap energy, don't have that anymore. Well-educated populace, we don't really have that anymore. Cheap labor, we don't have that anymore. And a stable country. If this happens, what happens to the economy?
This bun curl is the reason I started my way to hair training. When I found pros, I was desperate for a solution for.
Well, the stock market, it can, they're bull markets and bear markets. It goes up and down. But the one thing the stock market hates is uncertainty.
Right.
What we just described is maximum uncertainty. Because I gave you a scenario. It just laid out in the 12th Amendment, 1804. But you can bet that every step that I described will be litigated in some manner. So, the courts want nothing to do with this. I mean, you go back to 2020. The New York Times, all these people say, well, there were 15 cases, and they were all of them were decided that there was no voter interference and no election fraud. That's not what the court said. The courts dismissed all those cases,
right,
either on standing, jurisdiction, timeliness. They went to all these procedural things to get rid of the cases, but the actual fraud was never litigated. There's a lot of
that's whenever people are like, oh, well, they didn't find anything that happened. Well, no, they just threw it out on standing.
State legislature, you guys figure it out. We don't want to be involved in this. They still feel burned by Bush versus Gore in 2000. Having said that, they have a job to do, and I think these things are going to end up in their lap. But if you put the courts to one side and just go by the playbook in the 12th Amendment, and that was based on what happened in 1800, you would end up with J.D. Vance as acting president.
And because the Congress can say that he's an insurrectionist, you don't need a trial? I mean, he's never even been charged with insurrection.
Right. Of course, you're right, and I agree completely, but the 13th Amendment hasn't been, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, hasn't been litigated since we had the case last summer with Colorado and Maine, but before that you have to go back to the 1930s, of course, that was designed, that came after the Civil War, it was 1868. It was designed to disqualify Confederates from federal office, etc. Over the years, but Section 3 is the Insurrections Clause, but Section 5 empowers the Congress to make laws to interpret Section 3. They, sometime, I don't know the exact date, sometime in the 1920s, the Congress granted full amnesty to Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis. They said they were not insurrectionists. And so there has been legislation, and it has been litigated, not in recent decades, but if you were willing to cut Robert E. Lee a break, I don't know why they wouldn't do it for Trump.
Well, they did that. They did that to heal. I mean, that's why we have these statues of Robert E. Lee. That the North said, build a statue. These are heroes for you as well. They didn't prosecute these guys because they said we've got to come back together as a nation. Nobody's going to do that this time.
That's exactly right. The bitterness is we're sorry to say that, but it's there. And by the way, the leader of this, and he's open about it. I read the Constitution, did the legal homework, but the guy who says this is what we're going to do is Jamie Raskin, the Congress from Maryland. But most people are, they're worried about election fraud on November 5th. They should be. I think Larry Trump has done a good job of. I think they've mobilized 500 lawyers, and they're on that. And Republicans are finally waking up to the fact that you may not like mail-ins, but you got to do it. But this is way much further down the road. This is the end game. This is the final lawfare attack.
Yeah, man. If that happens, I think we go into full-blown overdrive, like what happened in 2021 in January. I think will look like peanuts, which may be why, remember my last video with them putting in these new sections, you know what I mean? And making lethal force on citizens okay. Maybe this is the plan all along, you can kind of start seeing it from a bird's eye view, listen to Jamie Raskin, the things that he's been saying, that we're going to have Civil War-like conditions if Trump wins, and things like that. I don't know, guys. It could get really bumpy for the next few months. There was a guy who was ex-FBI, he said that you should get 3 or 4 months worth of supplies, food, water, batteries, you know, get one of those drinking straws, you know. And, you know, I mean, November, December, January, I mean, jeez. I just thought y'all should see that, though. Okay, what do you think?